Dual credit students. Believe it or not, it's the start of our final unit for the year in dual credit English 3. And our last unit has a lot of pieces to it, and there's a kind of a long marathon process involved. So today, this video is just kind of the introduction to what you're going to be doing over the course of the unit and the first couple of steps, a description of the first couple of steps. So as always, make sure that you are taking each step in turn, not trying to skip ahead on that staircase. And you will find that this process is manageable and possibly even fun. All right, so you'll find in Schoology today this slide deck. I'm going to go through it really briefly and kind of show you how it works and how you're going to use it for the next couple of days. Okay, so on the first deck, you saw that this was the short story unit for paper number 5. And you might be asking yourself, what happened to paper number 4? Paper number 4 will be embedded in this unit. It will be an annotated bibliography documenting your research. More about that later. Today, we're going to start with step 1. And step 1 is basically choosing the topic for your research project. And in this case, the topic will be a short story, and that will be your primary source. So on the first day of this unit, what you're going to do is you're going to skim through several stories that we've provided for you. And then you're going to choose one that you like to really read a little bit more closely, commit to that story by completing a Google form, and then doing a basic reading check quiz on Schoology to help us understand how much you get from what you're reading. Okay, so today your goal basically is to choose the primary text for your research project. And as you know, the primary text is, in this case, in literary analysis, typically the story, the poem, or the novel that you're going to be learning more about. Over the course of this process, you will research the story, you're going to research the author's biography, and several other things, but that's all down the road. All you've got to worry about right now is choosing the primary text that you think is best for you. So this slide right here shows you kind of the next 3 days, which is the first chunk of this process. Today, you're going to skim through several stories, just kind of like open them, start reading them, see if it seems interesting to you. We've provided in this deck some basic summaries for each of the stories, and then you're going to pick one. You're going to read it carefully and try to just basically understand the literal meaning of the story. The next class period, you're going to reread the story and do some more like close analysis using a note-taking template that we're going to provide for you. And then on the third day of the unit, you're going to meet with a group of other students who have read the same story as you. All of these details are included on the reading assignment sheet, which is linked here on this slide. And it walks you through in detail what you're going to be doing over the next 3 days. Okay, so what I want to do now is give you sort of a basic, I guess, book talk for each of the stories that you have to choose from. We've chosen stories that are all about the same level of complexity and length. So I'm going to warn you straight off the bat. None of these are like what you consider like an easy read. These are complicated stories. They're challenging stories. And on your first read through, to be honest, you'll probably have more questions than answers, and that's good. That's what you actually want. But what I want you to do is kind of pick something that you think has a style or a theme or a subject matter that's really interesting to you, that you'd be interested in learning more about. So on each of the story slides, you'll see there is a link at the top with the title of the story. And that, if you click on it, has access to a copy of the story for you to read. And then a blurb, and giving you a basic outline of what the story is about. And then when it says research areas, that's kind of just giving you an indication of what you might possibly research going forward in step 2. Remember, we're in like phase 1 right now. In phase 2, you're going to be doing some research, and this gives you a little sense of what that might be like. And then, of course, some really cool cover art from some of the artwork people have created inspired by these stories. So the first story is called A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor. She is considered a Southern Gothic writer. Similar in style and subject matter kind of to William Faulkner, who wrote A Rose for Emily. And so in this story, a family takes a road trip, and you can see here in this picture the grandmother with the 2 grandchildren. And along the way, they encounter a frightening character named the Misfit. And so this story has kind of a blend of comedy, dark dark comedy, violence. There's some religious overtones in it. There's a theological debate at the end between some of the characters. And that's kind of A Good Man is Hard to Find in a nutshell. Flannery O'Connor is grotesque writer. She's very strange and unpredictable. Okay, let's go way back in time. Young Goodman Brown by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This was written during the American Romantic period, but it is set in sort of a Puritan society, colonial America. And so in this story, the main character, young Goodman Brown, his name is actually Goodman Brown, he goes into the forest, and you can see in this picture depicting the story, he encounters some like supernatural occult beings that sort of test his faith, test his character. It's sort of an allegorical type story, and it's got a lot of rich description. And so this would be a really good story for you if you really are interested in ethical debates or the Puritans or colonial America, or allegory. Okay, zip forward in time quite a ways to James Baldwin, and this story is called Sonny's Blues. And it depicts two brothers. It focuses on the relationship between two brothers. And one of the brothers is telling the story, and he's really thinking about his younger brother who has become addicted to drugs. There's a lot of sort of depiction of Harlem where they live, some of the conflicts and difficulties of living in that area. And as you can see from the picture, music plays heavily into this story. And so if you were to research this particular story, you might be looking at civil rights movement. James Baldwin is an African-American writer, and he also deals with LGBTQ type issues as well in some of his other texts. And so this story is going to be really kind of probably for people who like, maybe if you really like music, this would be a good story for you. Lullaby by Leslie Marmon Silko is a sort of a really elegant story. It starts at one particular point in the life of the main character, Aya, and her husband, Chato, who are Native people living in New Mexico. And it starts at this one particular moment, sort of toward the end of their life. And then it goes back in time and kind of helps you understand how they got to that moment. And then it ends back at that particular moment again. Their life has been difficult. They've lived in New Mexico on a reservation. They've had run-ins with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who forcibly removed their children from their home, and they've lost their son, and they have all kinds of difficulties over the course of their life. And so it's a beautiful story. There's a lot of, if you're going to be researching this, you'll probably want to research the Laguna Pueblo Nation and sort of learn about their traditional storytelling techniques and some of the legends of their tribe, because Leslie Marmon Silko is a contemporary Native American writer, but she draws from a lot of that typically in her stories. Caribou Cafe is interesting because it takes three different perspectives. So the first point of view, there are three sections in the story. The first section is from the voice of Sonia, who is a little girl in the city, trying to kind of navigate the streets with her brother. And then the second point of view is in the same area, but told from the owner of the Caribou Cafe. And he's very gritty, very vulgar kind of voice. And then the third perspective is from a young woman who has suffered a tragic loss. Her son was abducted by the Contras in Nicaragua, and she's like, really confused in this particular moment. And she believes that the children, Sonia and her little brother, are her children. And so she gets into this confrontation with the police, thinking that the police here in the United States are the Contras. And so this story is complex. You'll probably, if you do this, you'll want to research what are some of the things that like really factor into the story, the Contras in Nicaragua, what's that all about? And she is associated with the Chicana movement. Okay, so those are the stories that you have to choose from. And so today, go through, check out each of those stories, think about which one you want to pick, and then complete this Google form today. So that's basically committing you to a story choice, and then we can build our study groups from that Google form. After you've completed the Google form, you're going to read the story a little bit more closely, because on the first read through is probably going to be just like skimming each of the stories and you're like, all right, I think I want this one. And then you'll complete a reading check on Schoology, which is basic understanding, like what are you getting from this story? And again, at this point, at the end of this first day, if you have more questions than answers about the story, that's great. If you're confused, that's fine. Like that's very normal. So don't worry about it. Just keep moving forward. And on day 2, you'll have an opportunity to study the story a little bit more closely, reading it using and taking notes using an annotations chart that will be that's linked in here, provided for you. And so you'll complete as much of that as you can, and that'll help you kind of pick the story apart and figure out sort of the mechanics of the story a little bit more. You're going to write discussion questions. You can write down questions like, I don't understand this, or you can write sort of those close reading interpretive questions that we were working on in our previous unit. And then you're going to take notes day 2 about that story. And then on day 3, you're going to take whatever you've got and you're going to be paired up with other people who read the same story as you, and you guys will finish the annotations chart together and help each other if you are struggling with certain parts of it. So what I hope you see is that, like, if you're taking this, doing the work that you're supposed to do on each day, then it's going to be not overwhelming and you'll have plenty of support and time to do what you need to do. If you try to skip steps, it's not going to pay off. This is not the kind of work that you can do where you just read a blurb of the story and you're okay. Like, this is a close reading research assignment. So please do take the time each day to complete each step diligently. And I think you'll find that the process is definitely very manageable. As always, you're going to make sure that you reach out to your professors if you are confused, if you're not sure, if you have questions, or if you just want to talk about the story, things that interest or confuse you. So that is all we've got for you for today. So enjoy reading the stories, and this process will be one of slow unfolding of the understanding of your understanding of the story. It's not a one sit, figure it out kind of deal. So just kind of go with it and see anytime that you're confused, wondering, worrying about what's going to happen, just make sure you reach out to your professors and we will help you unworry. So right on.